permission to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you. Never lose hope.
Here, Fred Shaft.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, Fred!
Welcome to episode 457 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, July 25th, 2024 in the evening. Coming to you from Oregon, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From Northrend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldrassil, California, we have Megasa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. This week's episode is brought to you by our producers, Number Theory, Kresh, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottle Caps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Grizzly Bear, Tyler Knife, and SSJ5 Goku. And by our patrons of the week, Michael Wagenfuhrer and Joe Amund Utni Gustad. You can go to patreon.com/coinconcede to get perks like a thank you at the top of the show, early access to new episodes, one-on-one coaching sessions, and of course help support the show in the process. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. So, Life and Ladder. I really love this set, and I want to love it more. But presently, it does feel like it's a little bit held back by one specific thing in particular that just is sort of personally not enjoyable to deal with, and that has been on Zilliax. And for like multiple reasons. One is that it obviously shuts down aggro pretty hard. The other is that it's just so many boards. Like, trying to tackle it from a control angle is also miserable because with the current forms, we've got Druid, which has more ramp tools than just New Heights, and then Warrior is running like Chemical Spill to get it out quicker. And once it's died, once but especially twice, from that single play, it just gets resurrected over and over by Hydration Station. And whether if you're trying to connect with their face, that's never happening. If you're trying to clear a bunch of boards, that's also not happening. And because of the lifesteal, it's not even like you can ignore them and focus on their face, right? Like,
yeah. Unless you can go over the top, which is kind of how things have been working.
Right. But like, I have been messing around with not so much a big spell mage as just a Galactic Projection Orb deck that I actually feel really good about. But because what I end up having to suffer in that matchup is they fizzle a Marin, and then even though I would be obliterating them in fatigue over time, Marin shuffles in 3 cards, and they can do that a second time, and there's even more stuff to deal with. So unless I get extremely fortunate and am able to straight up freeze the Zilliax with Sleet Skaters until I can steal it with Yogg, then there's no shot. And when they're playing New Heights on 3 and then Chemical Spill on 4, that's just kind of too fast. And it's not a lot of damage, 4 damage, but it's like 4 damage a turn, and also you need to keep it from dying, and that's just hard. I mean, if they're really thinking, they may just sanitize their own board, right, to kill it.
Or if they're chemical spilling, they can just make sure that it's going to die when it comes out.
So there's not a lot of counterplay there, and I haven't. It was funny. I was like, okay, I guess I've got to put in my own Marin so that I can keep up on that front. And of course, I was like, I haven't seen any in a while, and I took it out, and then I faced one of these warriors.
That's how it works.
So
that's why people end up on the conspiracy theory Reddits about matchmaking algorithms.
Right. So it's, I mean, and when you consider like double Hydration Station and Boom bringing back both of them, and if they get any or all of those in a Fizzle snapshot.
Or from Zarok's crown.
Sure.
Because that's happened to me a couple times where they've gotten boom off of Zarok's crown, and I had had enough of playing that game at that point because I did not want to be there anymore.
And meanwhile, I'll like be sometimes keeping up for a good long while, right? And it actually takes them like playing the second Marin to get there. And like, I probably should have conceded earlier, but with like insidious stuff helping to clear and the amount of stuff that I can discover in that deck, it can go the distance, but it's just like this ultimate long game that kills you really slowly.
Yeah, that's one of the other things. I had a game that I should have conceded earlier. I was trying out Homie's Zarimi, which includes a lot more new cards, and you can get more Aman'Thuls this way. But unless you Aman'Thul the first one, which, like, no shot, that's not happening, they'll just keep coming. And it was like, there was no way that I was getting through this with what I had left at a certain point. But it was like, I still wasn't dead. I was still getting rid of them with Aman'Thul. It was like, but I should have left that game well before I actually did. And then it was actually a Reno. So they only had one hydration station, but they did have Boom Boss. No, not, yeah. They did shuffle 6 TNTs into my deck, and then I drew all 6 in a row, and then I left.
To me, the worst part of it is that hydration station should be really cool, and instead it's just boring because you're not actually playing new taunts that were created specifically to go with this play pattern, and instead it's just like, no, we just run one and we tutor it very efficiently with all you can eat in Warrior, or I don't know, Druid just draws a lot of cards. They might have a tutor as well. But then you're not, like in Warrior, you're not doing Rycleaver and Monstrosity and this dragon that's impossible to kill, right? That can only take 1 damage at a time. You're not doing any of that stuff because Indefeated on Zilliax is just better.
I'm actually surprised in retrospect, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me at the time. Because like I've resurrected a few big things in my day as a priest main. And like Diamond Spellstone said resurrect 4 different friendly minions, and I don't know why Hydration Station doesn't have the word different on it. Mm-hmm. Because if it did, it would not be nearly as oppressive. Like if you're getting 1 Zilliax and then 2 other big things off of that, it's annoying. It's a lot of stuff, but it's not as oppressive as this would be. So I'm surprised. I mean, that might be something like, they say that we're going to get a balance change in 2 weeks. Maybe that's something that they'll consider at that point, though. Yeah. Usually with that first balance change, they tend to stick more towards numbers only changes, but that might be something that would make, because we already have the technology, right?
They're giving more time for these changes though than they have on previous ones, so I don't know that they'll have to stick to that rule.
And with something like on Zilliax, you can't just increase the mana necessarily because of New Heights and because of Chemical Spell. It doesn't. Right. That doesn't make a huge difference necessarily. It could potentially give Aggro a little bit more time to go under, but if you also made Chemical Spell slower, but I think it's more likely they'll do some sort of rework, something with the Reborn, for example. Just take Virus module out. Panacea in the Discord has really been beating just get rid of the taunt drum, although the lifesteal still makes that really difficult. But it is also
at least
true
one
that
of those keywords. If you take just one of those keywords off, it gets a lot worse. If you take off Divine Shield, if you take off Reborn, if you take off Lifesteal, there's a few that you could take. If you take just like one of them off, then it does affect them.
And it is true.
It's so funny to me that the reason that this specific module combination wasn't a thing with the old virus was because stealth would mean that the back end would not be a wall, right? you cannot stealth and taunt, or you cannot taunt while stealthed, right? That thing they tell you the first time it happens to you. So, but once they removed the stealth for justifiable reasons to prevent this, like, I'm going to make this power stealthed thing and it's just going to grow and you can't do anything about it. Once they remove that, well, then the taunt gets to appear on both sides and it becomes this crazy defensive tool.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they will decide, even though perfect is original Zilliax keywords, we'll break it up and remove the taunt, or if they'll... I don't think a mana cost is sufficient, right? I don't think that matters. It's getting cheated out or ramped out anyway. But yeah, if you remove Reborn, then at least one play of it does not mean that you summon two, right?
Or you get rid of taunt and you add different to Hydration Station, or like...
I think it's possible that at least for, my situation, oh God, this is way too much stuff to out control, that making Hydration Station say different would be sufficient. I really think it would. It wouldn't probably make a huge difference on the aggro side of things.
It might make some, but not as much as the keyword changes for sure. But sometimes I will have a point where like I could get through one again and then get lethal, but having to trade your way through three of them or even just two of them is really not going to happen. The taunt, at first I was like, I don't know if that would make a difference, but it would definitely also reduce the amount that we're seeing the other Zilliax, which at this point, because like perfect is on so many of them except for ticking pylon.
I mean, Lifesteal Rush is incredible. Like Lifesteal Rush Divine Shield is amazing. And so
I mean, just the fact that it's 12 lifesteal when you play the Hydration Station is a big deal. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
If that was 4, that would give, I mean, you still have to be able to get through it, but like if you're only playing on the board, you can't trade through those. You're healing them up to 30. You've already used up a lot of your damage by that point as an aggressive deck. But if it was 1, and you have to, even if you're healing them like 16, it sucks, but maybe you could overcome that. But it's like when you're having to go through all of those before you can even do any damage, and all of your minions that are running into those are dying. Like it's impossible.
Right. Even
to deal
if
with.
I have like a nice big butt Zarimu board, it doesn't matter. Versus, or lots of the other decks can make it too. Sometimes with Pirate, DH, I mean, obviously you want to try to kill them before they Hydration Station, but if you have lethal on the turn they do it and you have Kane, then you can still get over the top, which shows that the taunt definitely does matter. Yeah. I had a couple of games where I was able to get over because of Kane, which is very satisfying, by the way. You're just like, I don't care that you Hydration Station. But that also mostly only worked because I didn't have a board for them to heal with when they Hydration Stationed. And then I just created charge on the board on that turn. So it is kind of over-the-top damage more than an aggro deck at that point.
I don't know like how prepared the team is or isn't in terms of just continuing to erode virus keywords. It is funny that just like all the non-interaction was on one module. But if they were to, instead of doing the Hydration Station change, if they were to just like take away the Reborn so that one play doesn't get 2 in the death pool for resummoning, then people would switch to Perfect Twin, and largely it would be better, but I think it would still be bad for the use of new cards, right?
Yeah.
I
was already doing that deck last set. I was doing that with Inventor Boom and one of the pandas, right? And just bouncing the pandas to get more Perfect Twins.
But like I want to see monstrosity in these warrior decks, and currently there's no justifiable reason to do it. And similarly, I would like the druids to run other taunts. It feels like, I don't know, kind of an oversight, just that like this was always going to be the thing you just resurrect forever.
Well, I mean, when they designed it, it wasn't that way, right? Because like when they designed it, they hadn't like keep in mind, they designed these cards a year in advance, right?
Sure.
So like by the time that they had designed, they got into Hydration Station, there was no concept of people using Zilliax, right? Because because it still had stealth, it wasn't going to be quite as oppressive, and it was expensive anyway. But once we got through there, and then it's kind of hard for them to change those cards, I guess, at the last minute. And it's also an oversight by not having it say different on it. I think that's
what I mean by oversight, right? Is not having it say different. Just because we've seen resurrect effects in the past say different.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, when they hit Reno preemptively, it would have been great if they hit Zilliax preemptively, but that's much easier for us to say now. Right.
Yeah.
And Zilliax was certainly a popular card, but we can also, I don't know when it would have lined up with their window. We were starting to see a meta where people were running Yogg in like everything just because of Zilliax.
Yeah. And now it's too slow, which is crazy.
Right, which is hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we don't even have that escape file. I certainly, there are decks I've been having fun with. There's more stuff that I want to try, and it just feels really frustrating that this is warping the meta. I am glad that they, like, part of me wants them to just, like, get rid of Zilliax tomorrow, but I also know that historically, snap balance changes, that they need to think about which change actually does this well, and then what happens when it goes away or changes.
Well, and also that like Warrior's starting to recede at High Legend, which will trickle down to the rest of the ranks to some extent, but it's still going to be meta warping, even if it's not meta defining, right? Like, I mean, the fact that like I am playing Rogue right now because of it should tell you everything you need to know about how meta warping that is. And I am not playing a Rogue that generates random nonsense because I still have some standards, but I have been known to abuse a Rogue deck that plays with the cards in its deck, but I've started playing the Lamplighter Rogue because it doesn't matter how much you lifesteal if you're still dying to all of the Lamplighters that can just go over the top. And
quickly for anyone who might not have seen this as much, because we had, it is spreading throughout ladder quickly, but in case you haven't seen Lamplighter Rogue, you play a bunch of garbage elementals every turn. And some of them have some good effects. Like there's the one that draws, there's the one that freezes the face, can be aggravating for some decks. And then you play Lamplighters and then you step them or you breakdance them, or some decks have even been playing bounce around them. You can get
featuring Girona.
Bounce around featuring Girona. You can play Sonya to get even more of them.
Yeah.
And then you kill them.
The big interaction there is that since Lamplighter costs 3, if you step it, then you have a 1-mana Lamplighter to play on the same turn as Sonya. Yes. And so that will get you extra copies. And then once you've gotten extra copies, if you still have mana because, your warrior opponent has 60 life, that's where like the bounce around comes in.
Yeah. And one thing that is not a bug that I've seen people saying, is this a bug? So like, let's say it is turn 7 and they play the first Lamplighter. And let's say that they've been playing a an elemental every turn, so it does 7 damage. And then they step it, and then they play it again, it will do 8. Because now there's been an extra turn that
it counts itself.
It counts itself. Yeah. So that is, if you're playing it, that's a little extra damage. If you're not playing it, that is intended. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, it's just like why if you had, the extra mana to go like Firefly and then Scar, right? You would do that for some extra damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very powerful card, and it's made Elemental Shaman good. Like that's what's exciting to me. I know a lot of people aren't into tribal decks. I always love them, right? I do enjoy some of that kind of deck building mini game of refining a tribal deck. Like if it's literally just like throw them all in, that's not great, but figuring out like, okay, which ones do you actually want?
I mean, it's all of them because you need to be playing an elemental on every turn. So it's basically all of them.
But there's a lot of elementals.
Yeah.
there are some trash elementals.
So you
yes,
do have to.
That is fair.
You do have to make some decisions, right? And mage has different ones than shaman does, and so we may be seeing an elemental mage pop up. Right?
I actually died to one yesterday.
It's already happened. Yeah, it's already happened. It's apparently at High Legend. It's very good. Well, and we're going to talk about all this in detail in Decksplanations, so I don't want to get too deep into that. But I will say that I had one game against a warrior today where they play Chemical Spill on 5 into Justicar True Heart on 6. And then they played Sleep Under the Stars to gain 1,000,000 armor on 7. And I hadn't touched them yet as of turn 5. And I basically I had a Lamplighter. I actually had 2 Lamplighters and a Sonya in hand, plus a bunch of Shadow Steps, right? So I just, decided, okay, as long as I can't die and the Zilliax doesn't die, then we're fine, right? Because even if the Zilliax dies, as long as I don't have it aboard and they can't heal, I mean, even if they heal it up all of it, like I've got plenty of damage as long as they're not armoring and healing, right? So I ended up on turn 6. So I had 2 Lamplighters. I played them both. I Shadow Stepped both of them on 6. So I brought them down to 19. They proceeded to go to heal back up to 27 and gain 15 armor the following turn with Sleep Under the Stars. So I then froze the Zilliax so it couldn't die and just played another elemental because I needed 1 more mana for what I wanted to do. And then so they gained another 15 armor the following turn. So they were 27 with 30 armor on turn 8. And I played Sonya with both of my 1-cost Lamplighters, right, which each did, at this point they did 9 apiece. So, or I think, yeah, they were both doing 9, and then I got 0-cost ones that also did 9. And then I played Bounce Around.
Wouldn't they get upgraded, right?
Well, the first, I think I played, I might have played something prior in the earlier in the turn, whatever. So I did 36 damage worth of Lamplighters, and then I prepped the Bounce Around and played 1 more Lamplighter. So I got them down to 13. And then they still, and I wasn't dead. I was at like 18. And they attacked and then conceded because they knew that I still had 3 Lamplighters in hand and 9 mana that would be able to do another 30 damage. And they apparently gaining 60 armor and healing like 20 life was not enough to be able to have the amount of damage I was able to do with that deck.
And it's funny because it's like, what do you bounce around and you only have the mana to replay one of them? It's like, yeah, it doesn't actually matter. The important bit was playing the 1-cost ones with Sonya, so you basically duplicate them, right? And then once all of them are in play, just getting them back to hand is enough. So, yeah, it's an insane amount of damage that deck can put out. And sometimes it feels really bad when they just kind of have the nuts and kill you on like 7 or something. I do think that's somewhat atypical unless
you're playing against a Pain Lock, usually. Pain Lock, that tends to happen because they'll just punch themselves in the face and you throw 1 Lamplighter and then that's the rest of the damage.
Yeah. Well, or, sometimes, yeah, you're playing a bunch of elementals, but you make these boards and if they don't deal with that, that's more chip damage.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you got the one that, you also got like the one that gives your elementals +1/+1 when you summon them. And like you can free stuff with Glacial Shard and you're drawing cards with one of them. Like, what's funny is that the Rogue is probably the 3rd best Lamplighter deck. It's just the first one that came out because apparently the Shaman has I messaged this morning that if this trend of me winning with Lamplighter Rogue was going to continue, I was going to be even more of a pain in the butt about Shadow Step than normal. But it turns out Shadow Step's not even the problem because apparently the Elemental Shaman and now the Elemental Mage are actually better across the board because the Elemental Shaman doesn't die to Demon Hunter the way that the Rogue does because of the 3/8 frozen Taunt Elemental, which is a house. That's a hell of a card.
But I'd be willing to bet the Rogue is the best in the matchups against Warrior Druid.
Yeah. The Shaman is worse against the Warrior specifically. It's got a negative win, or I think it's like a 40-something% win rate against Warrior, where where the rogue is favored. That's the one matchup where it is favored. But with warrior falling out of fashion, then the other elemental decks start to become favored.
It becomes, I mean, that old kind of game. I don't think rock paper scissors metas are like necessarily bad, because it means you've got a bunch of different kinds of decks. I know people always bring it up in a negative way because polarized matchups don't feel great, but I think that it's often kind of healthier because it means there's a lot of different play styles, and so no one's feeling like, great, they killed all of the kind of deck that I enjoy playing and I can't play it.
Well, and
you
this
just
also
have to tolerate some bad matchups.
This does show to some extent why they do need to take some time, because it seemed obvious yesterday, and I still would very much love to see something done to Zilliax, but they need to take time to see what's coming up. Like if they made a snap decision on what to nerf, like say it turns out that the elemental shaman is just completely insane and will take over if you get rid of Shadow Step and kill Zilliax, and then now what? And then everyone's like, "See, they made it worse." But like, they need a little time to see what's going on before they can make changes. It's not necessarily that the meta will completely fix itself, but the meta will definitely continue to shift, and things are being discovered. Certainly, I was sitting here going like, "That's the podcast. I should be able to say what's the priest deck." I still don't really know exactly what the priest lists are. I think the best fast priest deck right now that I've had success with, at least, there isn't enough data to say from a data perspective on it right now, is minimal changes Zarimi. So there are Zarimi lists with more changes. If you want to play more with new cards, check them out. We have one in the show notes. But I've been mostly doing, like, I took out my gyre worms, and I'm not even sure that's correct. But I wanted to play with other things, and I took out Marin. So right now I have Mixologists, because actually the +2 health to your minions is nice, or sometimes clearing a bunch of pirates of the Demon Hunter is nice, or just like 3 damage. You can copy it with Pip. I still have Pip in mine. A lot of people cut Pip, and I can see that argument, but I still have Pip in this one. And then Gorgon Zormu, obviously, easy inclusion, is good. But I think it's I don't know whether like Zarimi, the old deck is still the way to go, the new stuff failed, or it's just like the old deck is what we figured out. Like that deck took a long time to figure out. The new stuff with the Hunter cards, and is there like a Pain package? Is there like a 1-drop package with the Hunter cards? I don't know if there is or not, because it's hard to figure out. And there's not I think Warrior definitely did suppress some of the experimentation, because it is difficult to do anything that's not super optimized, because if it's not super optimized, then it's not fast enough, and then the on-kill axes come down, and then you're just like FML. I did have one game where 1% of the time, this works every time, this is how you deal with the on-kill axes. I had a really good start, then they double ratted and got my Zarimi, but they couldn't kill it, so I power chord synchronized my Zarimi. But that did cost me a turn. So I would have been able to Zarimi before their hydration station, but that cost me a turn. So they did, but I made a giant board and pushed through. And, or actually I would have actually been able to get it down before their first Unkiliax, was that? Anyway, it cost me a turn where I would have won otherwise. But I did get the Zarimi. I made a giant board. I pushed through their Unkiliax. I got them down to 10 somehow. Then they played Marin, Wondrous Wand, and happened to draw into their hydration station. But it was okay, because my Gorgon Zormuchis on the Zarimi turn had summoned me Dorian, and I drew Magatha. Like they cleared half my board, but I still had enough damage left when I drew a 1-cost Magatha, which drew me 2 Amanthuls, one of which was 1 cost, which cleared all their taunts. And then I went face. And I still had big enough things that I won. So that's your out, apparently. I actually have been doing pretty well with the Zarimi, but I'm also very familiar with the deck. And again, it's already a little bit more optimized. There might be other things to do later. I also played, I've played some Pirate Demon Hunter, did pretty well with that. I actually was not getting the hang of it, and then I had a coaching, and our patron said that that's what she wanted to play, and I'm like, oh no. I was like, sure, great, let's do it. And internally, I'm like, oh no, I just lost a bunch with this deck. But it was actually good to talk it out loud. We kind of figured it out together. She got to Legend. It was very exciting. And then I came back and said, okay, is this going to translate where I am? Because I was in top 1K. I am no longer in top 1K. But I did arrest my fall because I was falling pretty precipitously there for a minute. But it actually did. I was able to get the balance of when are we, like in the mirror, you actually do want to kind of trade the board because you cannot let them snowball their pirates. That's just bad. I've been playing Going Down Swinging because, like, for the mirror and stuff like that, because I don't want to be overrun by their stuff, and sometimes it can clear a Painlock board. But so I got the hang of that. That was fun. I've been trying a World 8 buff Paladin list.
Oh, I want to try that one. I took a look at it and I marked down the code, and then I had other things to do. But that list looks exciting.
I can't tell if I'm just not playing it right, or it's just almost there. He's actually considering taking out the rogue cards and the Lanessa. It's not a OTK deck. It's kind of like Naga Priest, except for without the problem where if you didn't draw Wig, you were toast. It's kind of a Naga Priest / Garden's Grace Paladin, because the Sea Shanty plays kind of like that, where it's this big thing. World 8 says it has a 40% win rate on Donkey, but I'm doing well with it. So basically now you're John Bray World 8.
It's John Brait. That's what he is.
I believe, but it might just take some. I think 40% is probably about where I am also, but it is super fun. So I think there definitely could be something there. We have that on in the show notes as well as we'll put the, I don't know how long we'll be updating it, but we have a spreadsheet on Steve's site, offcard.com/new meta decklist, with that World 8 Wicked and I will update with decks on Twitter for the first few days of an expansion, and do that every expansion. So I tried that
every so often. I tweets and I throw an Ike deck in just for spice, even though I don't have the code.
The Ike decks for it'll say the player, the class, and the archetype, and the archetype for Ike decks is just Ike. Everything else, I think
Hat started doing that, and I've just kept the tradition up. So.
Yeah, you just have to keep the tradition at that point. I also tried my favorite deck on day one, which I had to abandon because of Lamplighter Rogue, and it struggled some against Warrior, so that was a double whammy, was this Incendious Shaman that Edel made. That was more of a control Incendious Shaman. So you would stall with Hagatha and the new 5-mana Frost spell, and the 7-mana deal 6 to everything spell, and lots of smaller things to kind of clear the board. There's actually a ton of that. You have, and then you have 10 tons of tutors. The one change that I made was actually at World 8 suggestion, putting Caricature Artist. So you have your expensive minions are just Golganeth, because he's amazing, Shutterblock, and Incendious. And then you also have the Fairy Tale Forest to draw Battlecry minions, but you have other Battlecries, you also have Gaslight, Gatekeeper is very important. So the full combo, if you need the full combo, is that you play Shutterblock, then you play Incendious, then you play the mini for the Shutterblock, then you play out your 1-mana or 2-mana spell damage minions that you're running, and then you play Gaslight Gatekeeper.
Although I did find that you usually want to wait a turn before doing the shuffle, because you want to get that end of turn upgrade from Incendious.
Yes, you do want to wait a turn. Yes, you play the Shutterblock, then the next turn you play the Incendious. You can play the mini, but you wait to shuffle. Yes, so that you can get a bunch of 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how many spell damage minions you have out. I did kill some warriors with it. Sometimes it wasn't quite enough. If if the warrior realized, oh, I need to armor up, then it could be a problem. But if the warrior did not know that, then I could get them.
The other thing is you have to kill them in one turn, right?
Yeah.
If
that damage isn't enough, then you're not getting more, and that's pretty much it. So.
I mean, then you've got like maybe another spell damage minion in Malted Magma, but it's
The Malted Magma with a spell damage minion, though, even just to clear a board, like I was just destroying Painlocks by just like repeatedly clearing all of their stuff. So that was very satisfying.
It's the funny thing I could do, which is probably a different deck, but would be to use Wave of Nostalgia to transform the Zilliax.
Yeah, that's what some of the pirate shamans were doing. Yeah, because the pirate shaman would go wide anyway, so it was running like a one of Wave of Nostalgia to just transform, because that's like the only like that there you need like an AoE transform effect to do to stop it. Because you think, oh, well, I'll just run Thrall's Gift and I'll hex it. Okay, except that it's elusive, so that's not going to work. And like, yeah.
We'd never thought we'd have a day where we were nostalgic for Primordial Wave.
Or Mass Polymorph.
Or Devolve, yeah.
Yeah.
And yet, here we are.
Or what was the secret that sheeped something? It was like, oh, it's Potion of Polymorph.
Yeah. That'd be harder to hit. But
yeah.
Anyway, despite my thinking that, we would have more fun if there were not quite so many Zilliax around. I do think this set is incredible. Just from a deck building perspective, it's my favorite because Tourist is just so many more possibilities than Dual Class. So there's a bunch of ideas that I haven't even gotten around to because I am waiting for, post balanced world or even just meta shift to try them out. And it's really exciting, right? Like there's just whole archetypes that I just haven't gotten around to yet because there's so much stuff to do.
Yeah, same thing, but less deck building.
Yes. I've been trying a lot of things. I've been trying not to tank my rank too much, but that's also kind of comes with the territory, I guess.
I did really well with just like spells only mage, right? And pretty much the only inclusion is the location, the tide pools, and maybe like one or two other cards, but like the location is really good for refill because sometimes you don't get the manufacturing error and you could gas out with the other version of the deck. Tide pools adds a bunch, and the fact that it discovers specifically spells that cost 3 or less means that you are pretty likely to hit a bunch of the new cards like Seabreeze Chalice and Go with the Flow. And let me tell you, if you can like get the mana discounting elemental and you go with the Flow it before you make a copy with buy one get one freeze or reverb, like that leads to some crazy stuff. So I don't know like what the last 2 card choices are. I feel like it's like 26 or 28 cards correct, and the other ones maybe a little flexible depending on what you're seeing. But it was a ton of fun, and even though it wasn't playing a bunch of new cards, Mage is so much discover right now, right? Like that location that you discover a cheap spell, even if you don't get one of those new things, you can hit the other discovers, right? You can hit Primordial Glyph for a reroll, or the Shadow spell that I forget what it's
Void
called.
Scripture.
Yeah. So, and of course, you're already running those in the deck. So you're discovering cards constantly, and I'll be like, I mean, I'm not running Rising Waves, but I can find it, or I can find Heat Wave. It if I were seeing tons of board decks, maybe I do end up like just running Rising Waves. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, well, you can kind of discover your way out of almost any situation. And I've gotten lots of burn. Yeah, that was a good time. But we do have a little bit of news to talk about before we get into sort of the soft meta decks.
We've already been talking about it for 40 minutes, but we'll talk about it some more. But let's talk about the news for as a treat.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
Yep. So we are going to be running both a main set and a mini set Concede listener series. So we will be taking signups in the Discord as per usual, and the schedule is going to be such that it is going to wrap up before the mini set releases, so that we'll be able to start another one after the mini set. So signups are in the Discord. If you have participated before, you will know where to go. If not, there is a listener series Discord channel, and we'll either have instructions in there, or there will be very friendly and nice folks who will be willing to help you find your way to where you need to be.
So we should have the signups open Monday, July 29th through Friday, August 2nd, and then starting the series August 5th. If that changes, we'll definitely let everyone know, but no earlier than that, just to make sure that we have enough time to get through, assuming that the mini set is about 8 weeks out-ish, or at this point, maybe a little bit less. We want to make sure there's enough time. Obviously there will be balance changes during this period. If you've submitted decks for a week, right, the way that it works, you play one match a week at a time of your choosing. If you submit your decks and then there's a balance change, we do let you resubmit your deck. So don't fret about that. You just might have to be having the true Masters Tour experience of we have 24 hours to come up with a different deck slate. So...
Yes. Oh, and very important, the title of this Concede listener series is All You Can Beat Buffet. And it is going to be bring best of 3 ban 1 conquest as usual. So if we get enough interest, we'll run. We have run a EU specific division in the past. We haven't had enough interest of late, but if we get enough Europe people, we'll run a separate series for them. With the new patch, there are going to be known issues. A lot of them are resolved already. There are a few that are relatively important that you should be aware of. The big one is that the Mac crash bug is not fixed yet. I think we talked about this last week, but there is another note on this that it feels like it's getting worse, or at least like I'm running into it more. Like even when I'm not doing the whole 3-finger swipe to a different desktop or something like that. But if you're playing on Mac and you're playing on full screen and you try to change windows, it will crash. If you try to switch using Stage Manager, so like when you use the finger gestures to move to a different desktop or whatever, that will crash. I found it crashes sometimes even when I'm switching windows and not doing those things. But so just be aware, you need to play in window mode and just be a little bit careful, what you're clicking on, because you can sometimes end up like, oh, I clicked out of the window and I thought they would have taken their turn by now, and they have. So just be careful with that.
I've mostly been able to avoid it because I always play in windowed mode, and I usually have either like it's very aggravating if you like have lots of ways that you shift windows. Just like use the dock to shift your windows and be in windowed mode, and hopefully it will be fixed soon. I think that they've said that they're close to a fix on that.
Yeah, they're trying to get in an upcoming client patch, but just not this one. It happens to me more when I'm playing Battlegrounds because I tend to lose interest staring at the same screen for 45 seconds sometimes. More so than, in Constructed, where I'm actually like paying attention in between turns and stuff like that. There is also on mobile, there are some reports of players being prompted to repeatedly download an update each time they open the client. If you delete and reinstall, it should fix it. If you happen to get to play Priest, Sensory Deprivation, which is a card that makes a copy of an opposing minion, and if your health is 20 or less, then it will also summon a copy for you, or it will destroy the original. Right now, it is not destroying the original if your combined health and armor are 20 or more. So it's looking at your total effective health, not your actual life total. So do be aware of that. That's a bug that will be fixed. And also, if you're playing Scrapbooking Student, that can cause locations to become unresponsive on mobile devices. I don't know of any decks that Scrapbooking Student are in, but Arena is a thing. So if you're an Arena player, be on the lookout for that as well. We also did get a number of shop updates. So we got a few new hero portraits. We got a new legendary priest portrait, and it's Talanji. And I was ready to take out my wallet, and then I immediately put it back in my pants because I I understand that Talanji was a character in Battle for Azeroth and WoW. I've been informed of that on Twitter when I complained about this on Twitter. But from a Hearthstone perspective, this is a character who has been on one card, and that card was in Rosticon's Rumble, which we would all like to forget. And also, we already have a troll hero in Priest, several troll hero portraits. So I don't know why it's Talanji and not like a Zarella or even a Hedonis would make a lot of sense. I think a legendary Hedonis could be hilarious, but if you are so inclined and that is something that's there for you, there are also new portraits for Mage gets an AFK portrait for the first time constructed. There is a Vacation Rafam for Warlock, which is looks pretty entertaining. And there is Detectorist Finley, which is Finley with a metal detector on the beach for Paladin. Additionally, Sylvanas, the legendary Sylvanas portrait for Hunter, which is always available on the collection manager, but they brought the bundle back where you can get the 5 packs with it into the shop. And you can also get for 1,000 gold or $7 USD, you can either get Marshmallow Maiev or Trainer Kurtrus. So a bunch of hero portraits in the shop. If there's any of those appeal to you, I don't know how much gold people have lying around with having bought all the packs, but you do build up some of your gold relatively quickly if you've opened up everything you need to. There are also 2 diamond bundles in the shop, Diamond Sandcastle and Diamond Eliza Goreblade. Those both come with 2 Perils in Paradise signatures. They used to be signatures from prior sets, and they are now from the current set. Adel, you have some experience with these. So you can talk about that if you'd like.
So, no one ever say that I don't do science for the people. So after opening a bunch of my packs, I was looking through and realized that I was still missing Rayla. I think it was Rayla.
I think it was Rayla was the last one you were missing, yeah.
Who is the mage tourist into Paladin. And pretty good art on that one. There's a lot of really good ones. I got some ones that, at least playing-wise, I care less about. But so I thought, well, hang on. Is duplicate protection active for these signatures that you get from the bundles? Like, or not even duplicate protection so much as just like...
Will it prioritize the ones that you don't have, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Filling in the missing spaces. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it. And I got the Sankazel one, and it worked. So either I mean, it's sample size of 1 because it has to be. Either I got incredibly fortunate, or it works. And if you find yourself like just missing a couple legendaries, and you're interested in the signature art, you can get one of these to kind of guarantee you get that one. I do wish I had the Gorgonzormu one, because that one is really good, and Gorgonzormu is neutral, so it can be in a lot of things. But I ended up with both of these bundles, and not proud of it. But yeah.
and I should point out that trend of hat rigging my pack openings to force me to get the rogue signature has continued uninterrupted for a 4th consecutive set, because I got the Maestra signature in my pack openings. So I now have every rogue signature since Hat left the show, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So at least I did get to use my signature Sonya for the first time today when I was playing the Lamplighter rogue. So that was a nice surprise.
You get to appreciate that one.
Yeah.
I would say you'll never use Maestra, except that she is mysteriously the tourist card into Warlock. So if there's ever anything where you want to use the tourist stuff into Warlock, I guess there's a possibility. Still not high odds, though.
There's plenty of time left. So, but that's going to do it for news. But hey, we haven't talked about decks a lot this episode, so why don't we talk about some more decks?
All right. Well, we've already talked about a number of these, but we just wanted to give a bit of an overview of what are decks right now that we're seeing. Huge caveat, as we've mentioned, the expansion has been out for only a little over 2 days at this point. So
it always feels like so much more.
Yeah.
Things will change. Things are already changing probably as we're recording this. So we're not saying necessarily these are going to be, these are the best decks or these will be the best decks by the time you're hearing this. But things are starting to shake out and just give a lay of the land as much as we've been able to see it in the trends that we're starting to see. But as usual, things can change. One good source for decks that I think is less known, although we mention it a lot, is HS Guru, aka Donkey.top, Donkey with a 0 instead of an O, is a good place to look for like what are decks right now. I have often used that a lot in new metas, and you can filter by like minimum number of games before it shows up, and win rate and class and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're having trouble finding deck stats, that is another place to look. Anyway, okay. So we already mentioned this, but we could put rock, scissors, paper. You put that out of order.
Well, because of the order that we're going to talk about them in, because like rock, because
some of these assignments are a little.
I mean, it's rough, right?
I get what
it's
you're
not.
saying.
It's not. It's kind of. They're kind of. I had to work Lizard and Spock in to make it all work, but it's
well,
it's not really a true rock paper scissors meta. But there's kind of 3 groupings, which are the Zilliax deck, the Aggro decks, and the Lamplighter decks. And then there's a bunch of oddball stuff that's still viable, but it doesn't fall into any of those categories.
I think it's more just like we have like Painlock is an aggro deck, but I think it actually might do well against the warrior because it gets under them. Whereas like Lamplighter, Shaman, or Elemental Shaman and Elemental Mage struggle with Unkilliax, right?
So they're very hot scissors.
But I think we can say there's some categories. There is Zilliax. We've talked a ton about the warrior with Zilliax. There is also ramp/tempo druid, which is different than the spell damage druid, which we will get to. So is this one okay, yeah. So the ramp druid runs, say, like Mista Vista, Sleep Under the Stars, Zilliax, of course. The one that you have, this is different than... Someone else talk about the druid because I'm not familiar with this list.
I'll be honest, I haven't played this a lot yet either because I'm still trying to get my head around it. But it's running concierge is kind of what this type of deck is doing, and it's running concierge pretty much exclusively for Seabreeze Chalice.
Yeah. So
it's trying to get a concierge down with with Seabreeze Chalice. Seabreeze Chalice costs 1. It's the mage card that does 2 damage. It's arcane missiles, but 2 of them. But you can do it. It's a drink, so you can do it 3 times. So assuming that you get a concierge down, then all of it is free, and you machine gun the board or your opponent's face, ideally.
Yeah. So that's the spell damage druid then, basically, or is this? Well, are there 3 decks?
It's not all in on the spell damage. There's another version that's really all in on the spell damage, and it's an OTK deck. This is more of like, this is an alternate win con, or it's something that it's not relying just on big dumb idiots to win. It's also got like this additional burn damage that it can use to finish the game.
It's really akin to like the deck that came out of that one VS player where it was just kind of like a good stuff druid.
Mm-hmm.
The hybrid druid, yeah.
It's really reminiscent of that, where it's like you run dragons because they're good, right? Like, and it gives you access to another ramp tool, but you're not actually running New Heights because you don't want the game to go that long, right? So it's like Take to the Skies for Splish Splash Whelp, Gift Wrapped Whelp, Desert Matron, and Spine-tailed Drake. Those are all and Chia Drake. Those are all the dragons. You do have
and Phi.
Right, yeah, and of course Phi. It's basically enough dragons to make Phi playable, right? So you can,
and to make Splish Splash Whelp actually activate. Yeah.
So you can have that ramp and that defensive tool. And then you've got the spell damage stuff. That's pretty good, right? Dollhouse, Bottomless Toy Chest, and the Chia Drakes are both, draw if you need it or spell damage if you need it. Sleep with the Under the Stars. Just get used to that card. It's going to be in every deck that can run it. It's just one of those where it's so flexible. But
it's like Ultimate Hibernation is kind of what it is. Like instead of Ultimate Infestation, Ultimate Hibernation.
God. Oh man. Yeah, it is. But yeah, what you're going to do is get a few points of spell damage. Concierge also discounts Go with the Flow, right? So you can give the Concierge another little bit of spell damage. And so you really are like building your own Malagos. Instead of Aulonius, which creates just ludicrous amounts of spell damage, you're like, you have 1 to 2 dollhouses in play. You have probably the miniature from Chia Drake, and then you put some spell damage on Concierge. And if it has 3, each chalice is doing 5. So you just get a swipe in to clear the path, right? To clear away all their minions. And then you can play, 6 to 9 chalices for 5 apiece. And it works because Tide Pool Pupil, as long as you get the first drink inside it, like sometimes you'll see someone play a Seabees Chalice on 1. They're doing that because they have a Tide Pool Pupil in hand and they want to get the first drink in it so that they can they'll save the other 2 drinks from that chalice and then have a full one in the pupil, because pupil only takes the first 3 spells it sees. So I do want to try this one because I like spell damage things, but it is doing the kind of toxic thing of Concierge to make 1 costs free.
Yeah. I mean, that's another one that feels like it ought to have had, the Bodicus rule applied to it, where, the things can't cost less than 1.
The Bodicus agenda
just a couple,
returns.
Yeah. A couple of other small notes, like you can also use Bottomless Toy Chest to get extra chalices also. That's another way that you can get more of them.
Yep.
If you have spell damage down. And also this deck runs Tertolan Traveler, which is the 1/5 taunt that draws a taunt out of your deck and discounts it by 2.
That's
obviously
not
Zilliax. Obviously, Zilliax is a hit on that. That's obvious. But what's not obvious is that the only other taunts that you run are Desert Nest Matrons. Mm-hmm. And when the Desert Nest Matrons cost less than 4, they still refresh 4 crystals. So they are net positive mana when you play them, as long as you have enough mana for it to refresh. So as long as you've used 4 crystals, you pay 2, you refresh 4, you net 2 mana when you play it that way.
Also,
that's another important thing to keep in mind.
Also, Phi.
Sure.
Which is fine. You're perfectly happy to get Phi.
That's fine too. Yeah, that's also fine. So yeah, like any of the hits are good, but the it's something that with the Nest Matrons that's not immediately obvious until you've if you've been playing it the Marin version, like you would know this from when you draw 0 mana Nest Matron and then it's like an Innervate on steroids. This is basically Innervate on pre-nerf Innervate on a stick.
Yeah, so that is a little bit different version of the Druid than I've seen, which is why I was like, wait a minute, what am I looking at? Because I had seen one that was more just like the Warrior, which I think has gone away, because if you're just going to do that Unkiliax thing, you're just playing Warrior. And because you have better ways to cheat it out. And then we might as well talk about it since we started to mention it. There is sorry, I'm messing with your slides, Wicked. There's a more just like OTK spell damage Druid. The one that you have here is just like Aulonius. Are there any new cards in this deck?
No, there aren't.
Okay, so that is the same deck, and there's versions that are just even more all in on the Concierge, but those have mostly been replaced by the Dragon sort of hybrid version of the Chalice Druid deck. Apparently it's just a lot stronger. The Dragon package, as we know from Druid over the past several months, is just really strong. So it makes sense that the Chalice by itself maybe was not nearly enough. I also tried to play the spell damage, small spell damage mage, and I just had no draw, and I just gassed out on every single one, and it was very sad.
Yeah, that was my experience too. Yeah.
But yeah, so Alonius Druid. It was on Aegis Guru. You can play that. No new cards, apparently. But going back up, okay, I think we talked enough about control. There's also a Highlander Warrior featuring on Zilliax. It's just basically last expansion's Highlander Warrior, except also on Zilliax and Hydration Station and New Heights. Yeah.
Maybe a trail mix if you're feeling spicy, but yeah.
Maybe a trail mix, yeah. Then in terms of aggro, we mentioned Pirate Demon Hunter. There are a few different, there's a core that I think there's a lot of agreement on, and then there are some different variations. So the one that we have up here is running, so some of the core, you have Patches the Pilot, you have Treasure Distributor, and Adrenaline Fiend, and Dangerous Cliffside. So Treasure Distributor is the one from that it's a 1/2, and when you summon a pirate, it gives itself and the summoned pirate +1 attack. That one can be like a little tricky to use because if you're doing the Sigil of Skydiving that summons the 3 charging pirates, you want the Treasure Distributor already to have survived from the last turn, which can be a little risky, but sometimes, especially if you're on the play, whatever, just play the Treasure Distributor. Or if you're on turn 3 and they don't have a board, you can Treasure Distributor, Sigil of Skydiving, hope it lives, and sometimes it doesn't. Oh well. Other times,
and it could just be a decoy too, because the card you really want to get down with the Sigil of Skydiving is the Hosen Roughhouser, because that's the one that buffs them when they attack. So if you're using up their removal on the Treasure Distributor to make sure, the Hosen Roughhouser has 4 health, but also it's going to be a much bigger target than the Treasure Distributor. So, that's something that you can kind of bait out some removal, and then you actually play the card you wanted to play with the Sigil of Skydiving afterward.
And I've been playing a version that cut the spirit of the team, even though that is a good card. And the, what else did I cut? I think I replaced Illidari's Studies with Taste of Chaos, which is probably incorrect. But anyway. And I had replaced the Parched Desperado and included the core card, the core 3/3 South Sea Captain, I want to say, that just is an aura
I've seen that.
of all +1/+1, because it's nice to have more redundancy instead of just the Hosen Roughhouser. And sometimes if it's late game and you have a cane charge thing against a warrior through their Hydration Station, you need every +1/+1 you can get. Board space is an issue in this deck. Definitely be aware of that, especially with the Dangerous Cliffsides, which is the new location. So sometimes it's actually correct to kind of not use all the charges of the location right away, especially if you can save that for something like the Adrenaline Fiend, which is the pirate that after you attack with a pirate, you get an attack. That works better if the location is already open. So that you can use it, because oftentimes you'll get this place where you're, great, I can attack and reopen it, and then I'll get attack on my hero. Wait a minute, that doesn't work very well. So sometimes leaving the Dangerous Cliffside open and waiting, maybe you have a full board of pirates. Okay, if they clear it, I still have Dangerous Cliffside, and I can even get a second round after I attack if I want, potentially, if you still have 2 durability left on it. And as I said before a little bit, you do want to be... So this version and the version that I'm running is running Going Down Swinging because of the mirror, because of Pain Luck. It just helps you make sure that they don't just get away with the board. Because the thing about the Demon Hunter, it can just burst. They have charge. But if you stick something like a Hosen Roughhouser, that's so much better. Or if you stick your early Battle Fiend and or Sock Puppet Slither Sphere, right? You don't really want to let them stick that kind of stuff if possible. So even in the mirror, you're playing that. I find the mirror is kind of fun to play actually as a person who enjoys aggro, because it is a little bit that incremental, just make your board a little awkward for their board, so that then, but there is some comeback with things like Sigil of Skydiving. It isn't just well, they got a better minion than me on turn 2, and I may as well concede now because the game is over. So it's not like that, because you do have charge and things like that. I've also seen a lot of Naga Demon Hunter, just with the new type pool people. Because
that'll work.
That works. So
that's a Naga and a smell. Yeah.
And I've been seeing them not even running shop, they're not running shopper, they're running like a small pirate package, and then they're running all the Naga stuff. Actually, I don't know that they're even running pirates so much, but mostly just like they can have more density of Naga and they have the Typal Pupil, and that gives them a little more reach because it also rediscovers the spell. And
do they use the amalgam?
Yes, they also use the adaptive amalgam, and that also helps make sure they don't run out of Naga later. Like they can play them earlier because they're going to have more Naga later, which could be a problem that you would just like run out of Naga. So then you didn't want to play them early. Like it does seem like it improved the Naga Demon Hunter deck. I'd have to look at the exact list.
One other thing about going down swinging is that if you really do need to reopen your location, that will let you do that if you're frozen. And there are a lot more glacial shards in the meta right now, so that's an increasingly relevant tip.
It can help you, and it can be another way to clear top. But yeah, that actually really is important. It can help you open the location. Also, if you're not frozen, you can do that first to reopen the location and then still get the bonus from Adrenaline Fiend from those things from the location. So that did come up for me once. Kind of a niche thing, but it is good to know about the going down swinging. And if you do have to attack into a Zilliax with it, they at least won't get their lifesteal, although it's only one of their like 4 hits, obviously. But you are immune.
Yay!
So at least they won't get their lifesteal. And yeah, Paraglide has been a pretty good card. Sometimes it's a little awkward to get into outcast position, but this is a pretty low to the ground deck, so that's usually not a problem. Some people have been playing the Sigil that draws 3 instead. If you're finding the Paraglide awkward, that's another option. It's still pay 3, draw 3. So
it's probably going to be 3 for next turn either way, so it's probably not that much of a difference, honestly.
Yeah, so if you're finding it awkward with the outcast, you can use that as an option as well. All right, Painlock. Painlock is pretty much, got just some straightforward upgrades here with the Cursed Souvenir, the Fearless Flame Juggler.
A second 3 power 1-drop that hits you for 3?
Yep.
If you're just looking at raw stats, it is more than Flame Imp.
Yeah. It's technically got an extra health there. And it's vulnerable to different kinds of like they have to have AoE kind of instead of just 2 damage,
or something like a Seabreeze Chalice, or like a Horizon's Edge. Yeah.
Assuming you don't get unlucky,
right? Because it can go phase. It does have that problem, which is normally good, but it has the problem where if you want it to hit minions, it will not hit minions. If you want it to hit face, it will only hit minions. This is just science.
Yeah,
that is always how that works. So the Sheriff Balebrim, I guess that is one way to maybe deal with a early Unkilliax, is that you just put it in jail with the Barrel Brim.
It's also really good for dealing with Meltamental from the Elemental Shamans, because that's also kind of a wall. I mean, it's literally a wall. So getting rid of that for 2 turns is actually pretty good. Just any taunt. It doesn't have to be one that life steals and comes back. It can just be any sort of a big taunt that's in the way. It's pretty good for.
And then it's also running...
Or even like a Desert Nis Matron.
Yeah, that's true. Just kind of anything in the way. Or if you're fighting an aggro versus aggro board battle, just whatever their big thing is.
Yeah. And I mean, you breathe and you get down below 20, so it's always going to be active.
Do be careful with the Lamplighter Rogues, although I suppose with the Lamplighter Rogues, maybe you just don't be careful, you just try to kill them first.
Yeah, I don't think you can afford to be careful, because I think it does take the Lamplighter a few turns to ramp up, and if they don't have you dead, if you don't have them dead by the time that the Lamplighter comes online, you're probably not winning that game anyway.
So just go all in. I mean, playing Painlock is kind of a game of chicken anyway. It's just a lesson in being fearless to some extent. Obviously, there are some times when you do have to watch your health total, but when I have played it, there's a lot of you know what? Nope, we're going to go down and see whether they can kill us from here. And it's also running the Party Planner Vona, which is the one with the Ouroboros. It's just Ouroboros.
I think that's been going in and out.
That's been going in and out.
I think that's been going in and out of the list. I don't know that it's consistent, but it's definitely been going in and out. I think Cursed Souvenir is one of the bigger things, just because that's the one that gives +3/+3 and then does 3 to your face at start of turn, because it means that like a turn 1 Flame Imp needs to be answered. Like it used to be that you could just like, okay, well they'll play a Flame Imp, I'll take 3, whatever. No, now I'm taking 6. And it's also doing more damage to them on their turn, so then they can play something like a fearless Flamelighter.
Flame Juggler.
I don't know. Flame Juggler. My eyes are bad, but yeah. So you can play a fearless Flame Juggler, which gets +X for how much damage you've taken on this turn, so that gets bigger. Like there's a lot of things that just kind of juices for you. So you do have to respect the turn 1 minions, even if they're not directly threatening, they have potential threat attached to them.
Yeah.
One thing if you're facing Painlock, though, if they have a minion with Cursed Souvenir out, and you're trying to figure out whether you have lethal, you have 3 more damage than you think.
Yes.
That is sometimes relevant. Do keep that in mind.
It's start a turn, not end a turn. So yes, do keep that in mind.
But otherwise, deck plays very similarly to how it played before. And it's definitely powerful. You had put under sort of other promising decks, but we talked some about Zarimi Priest. I'll put in the Zarimi Priest list that I'm running, which I mentioned in Life on Ladder, is just pretty minimal changes so far. I do think there could be something with the Hunter cards. I mean, Vol'jin is a good card. Being able to tutor your 1-drops is pretty strong. I just felt like it wasn't fast enough for an Zilliax meta. But maybe if we just actually have a smaller Hunter package, that would work. And there's also been... I haven't played that much myself with the Pain plus Zarimi direction that I know was in the VS Theory Crafting article. But I was looking more at things like Mixologist. But I have been doing decently well with it. And especially if you end up seeing fewer warriors as things develop, that would be helpful for it. There is also Aggro Paladin, which is pretty similar to how it was before. Gorgon Zormu, also a good card for that archetype. You don't necessarily have to be greedy about getting really high-cost minions. In Zarimi also, you don't have to be greedy necessarily unless you can see that they're going to clear every board and you need to get big things on your Zarimi turn. But in Zarimi, and especially in Aggro Paladin, you don't necessarily need them to like wait a bunch of turns for them to be super big. Like even if they're 2-drops or 3-drops, that's pretty good. You're paying 2 mana for that. And there's 3 bodies on the board. Sometimes they do extra things. Sometimes they're a Dorian and that wins you the game. So yeah, if you were a fan of Aggro Paladin, that is basically just Gorgon Zormu is the main change in that deck.
From Flood Paladin. That's the Flood
The
Paladin.
Flood Paladin, yes. Yeah. You can also... I haven't really seen a lot of hand buff. I would assume that Sandcastle is just insane in that deck, but I haven't really seen any of it.
So good. Yeah.
It is, but Zilliax is insaner.
Right.
And it comes down faster. And the only way that you beat Zilliax before was with Yogg, and now Yogg doesn't come down fast enough, and you don't have enough Yoggs.
Yeah. I think while Zilliax is the way it is, it's going to be a struggle. And of course, some of the aggro decks can get under you, right? So there might need to be some build adjustments there. But yes, Sandcastle is really, really good with buffs, because it's like an outfit tailor you can preload onto the board, right? You get it out there, you make it a location, so it's basically uninteractable. Yes, there are a few things that deal with them, but people aren't really running them. And then because you've got this really buffed Sandcastle that can give something plus its attack and rush, but the rush doesn't matter because you do something that can go face.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the rush does matter in something like World 8's Buff Paladin. That actually matters a lot because you're fighting for board. If you're doing hand buff Paladin, you probably are not using the rush as much. When you're playing it... You
probably are, because you're probably desperately behind by the time you get any of this stuff to happen, because like hand buff Paladin was a 4-set meta deck. You do not have 5 turns to set up in this meta anymore. Like if you have 5 turns to set up, you're about to run into a Zilliax wall. So that I think that's really the main thing holding it back. Like you would spend the first couple turns just playing a gold panner, playing instrument tech, play your 2 attack weapon on 4. That will not you're already half dead by the time you get the weapon down in this meta.
I mean, the plushie is very powerful. It may just be that people need to adjust their list to be more defensive. Put back in the 2-3 rush finale lifesteal thing.
Yeah, I would think you definitely want that. I mean, use Sandcastle for rush if you have to, if you're facing an aggressive deck. I think if we see a reduction in the warrior, then it might make sense to do the hand buff. But I could see Zilliax definitely being a problem for this deck. You do want to know when you're playing the Sandcastle. So you have it has rush, you attack into something, it becomes a location. When you use that location, it'll come back with rush, even if it's the next turn, not charge. It's not like it doesn't remember that it could go face if it hadn't been a location. So keep that in mind. And then when it becomes a location again, it's closed. So you can't just like toggle back and forth, kill a whole board. So do keep in mind that then you will have to wait a couple turns to use it again. Or you just leave it as a location until you want to use it and don't use it right away. Kind of like with the Dangerous Cliffside, you don't have to use it right away. Sandcastle, you don't necessarily have to use it right away if you're not using it for like a defensive rush. Or you don't have lethal with it right that second. I will wait and see what happens with Warrior and then maybe try hand buff Paladin. We have on sort of aggressive decks, the bonk shaman is what at least what Donkey's calling it, which is a carefree cookie shaman.
I mean, carefree cookie is in there to get access to the Demon Hunter cards. You don't like
it's a tourist shaman, I should say.
This is actually just all in on like skirting death, and I guess you're using Flame Tongue Totem to bump up your own minions to be able to skirting death them some more, to be able to Horn the Wind Lord. I mean, Flame Tongue Totem is just a good card in general, but yeah.
I think the Flame Tongue Totem is largely because like you summon these 3 charge minions and you can get minimum 4 damage if you're going face, or if you need to do the totem slide, you can use them that way to trade into things. I would want to experiment though with putting conductivity in this deck, because if you're running Jam Session, Trusty Companion, and Skirting Death, those are all things that you can potentially make insane with conductivity.
Yeah.
Right? Like you set up the sigil and let's say you're on coin, you summon these 3 charging pirates, coin, conductivity, Jam Session, go face for 12.
There
Seems
is
good.
Alteris in the Discord posted basically this deck, but with conductivity. I'll throw it into the show notes. With Jam Session, Jive Insect, and the new thing that steals 4 attack, as you were just saying, like a skirting death, all of those things, and then it's just like you have lots of little guys. It is running 1 wave of nostalgia, I assume, for Zilliax, this particular list, and you have Horn and the Wind Lord.
You also just go wide.
Yeah.
You go wide. Like sometimes it's just like, okay, well, I got a signal of skydiving and come down. Now they're all legendaries, right? Like the random legendaries are very variable, but they're usually bigger than 1/1s. So, that's still going to be an upgrade a lot of the time.
Yeah. Shaman got like such interesting ways to build with these Demon Hunter cards, right? Because you can do the Wind Fury thing with all these ways of making tokens. You can do Wave of Nostalgia stuff. Of course, you've got Thrall's Gift for Bloodlust, right? And there's almost like so many things I want to put in one that you can't quite do them all.
And that's part of what I mean by like there's so much promising in this set. It's like this is cool. There's so many different things that you can possibly put in it. I need to play with it. So I think maybe the meta will naturally settle out a little bit on this, and then if they have a chance to think about the balance changes, then hopefully we'll be able to play with even more of these things. So I just love that we have like stuff going on in Shaman, because I feel like it's been a while since we've had, especially just like stuff on the board. And there's cards here that I've always felt are good, but haven't seen a lot of play outside of like World 8 making it work, like And Backstage Bouncer is just like a good card. That's the 4/5 taunt that makes something else a 4/5 taunt. And it's fun to see that. Trusty Companion has always seemed like it should have a home, and it has had some homes. Of course, there's also, I'm sure that's in the Elemental Shaman as well, that we'll talk about in a second. Jam Session is just a good card, but it hasn't really seen play in Shaman as much as it did in Rage Warrior as the main place. So this deck makes me happy, and I need to try it. So that we talked a lot about the Lamplighter Rogue. But I don't think we need to talk more about the Lamplighter Rogue. Lamplighter / Elemental Shaman. Where is Elemental Shaman? Just has a lot of elementals. Meltamental, as we've mentioned, is just a really big butt. You have Incendious. You don't have like ways to... Like the Incendious is not there as a combo like the Incendious Control Shaman that I was mentioning at the top of the show. It's just like also an elemental that also is cannot be ignored. It has 10 health. That's a lot for someone to deal with. You have Kalimos, you have Scar the Catastrophe, you have Azurite Giant, you have Magatha because you're like literally only running 2 spells.
And you're fine if you give those to your opponent. Like if you give your opponent a Trusty Companion, it is certainly not the end of the world against most decks.
Yeah,
maybe if you're playing against another elemental deck, you're upset, but otherwise it's not that big of a deal.
And it's not even super likely. And as someone who's played Magatha in decks with more spells, like you just have to rip Magatha. Like if you are sitting there worrying about giving a spell and not playing Magatha, then you should. If that's you every single time, then just cut Magatha. But not from this deck because this deck it totally makes sense.
Rip Magatha if it's not going to break your elemental chain. That's what's really important.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like you don't play Magatha on curve. You play Magatha on 6 with a Firefly or a Glacial Shard, or even Shock Hoppers in Elemental also. But that's the one thing that you have to be a little bit careful of in this deck. Is there are a couple of gotchas that will mess up your chain. A smaller one is around Rolling Stone, which is the 2-mana 2/2 with Rush that gets +1/+1 if you played a 1-cost card before it. It doesn't have to be on the same turn, but do be careful with that because there's a really easy trap to fall into, which is, it's not that big of a deal because Flame Revenant effectively does the same thing by giving elementals +1/+1, but you're not going to like, if you want to double dip on the +1/+1 buffs, you need to play Flame Revenant and then a 1-drop and then Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit careful with that. It's very easy to have a Rolling Stone in your hand and see it yellow, and then all of a sudden it's green, and you're looking at like, why? So just be careful with that.
And you have so much more over. It used to be just kind of like Scar or Bust, but you have so much damage with Lamplighter, and a little bit extra with Incendious. You still have Kalimos. Like, I can see why this is suddenly better than it used to be. Glacial Shard also, like if you're facing a Demon Hunter, you can turn off their location by Glacial Sharding their face, unless they have Going Down Swinging, but that's the thing to remember.
Yeah. Or you can just freeze it on Zilliax for a little while. And this deck does it does a better job than the Rogue does at getting chip damage in with the minions so that the Lamplighters and the Scar can finish the job. That the Rogue compensates by that by just having a million activations to the Lamplighter. But you kind of need to do that because your minions in the Rogue really don't do anything other than maybe like value trade, or not even value trade, but just like trade off some opposing minions. Here, the minions themselves are actual threats. Like it takes work to get through a Meltamental. Minecart Cruiser rather is a real card. It is a 4/5 rush that is never going to have overload because you're always going to have played an elemental before.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's amazing.
Like
so
you get Azurite Giants, you get Living Prairie, which is the 5/4 elemental that summons 2/3/3 cows with Rush that we've forgotten entirely about for Badlands.
It had such
but
good
it's actually
flavor,
a good
though.
card here. Yeah, I mean, beef is delicious, but yes. But yeah, so like you have actual cards, and like Menacing Nimbus can also get you other stuff too that can play for board. So you can actually, it's a little bit on rails as far as these kinds of decks are concerned, just because you're kind of forced into your next play based on what elemental you can fit in, and you have to sometimes be thinking a couple turns ahead, like, am I going to play a bunch of minions now, or do I hold some of these things back to make sure that I keep my chain going? Because if the chain stops, you die. Like, you're never building it back up. So you have to keep the chain going no matter what. But so it is a little bit on rails, but it's just a bunch of big butts, and then you have over the top damage to finish up.
Yeah. You have, if Elemental Shaman is not your style, what about Elemental Mage? Is similar, but different cards. You know, you still have your Firefly, you still have your Glacial Shard, you still have your Flaming Revenant, your Rolling Stone, your Lamplighter, of course, but then there are...
Shale Spider.
There are actually... Yeah, Shale Spider. Those are in common. But there's actually a lot of cool mage elementals that no one remembered existed because Elemental Mage was never really a thing.
So Aqua Archivist is great. The next elemental you play costs 2 less. So if you run that out on 2 and you've got a Flame Revenant in hand, you can have some pretty crazy spikes where you play the Flame Revenant for 0 and then toss out like 3 1-drops, right? And they all get buffed. Really nice. Or maybe you play the Archivist going into your turn 4, and you're an elemental deck. You've been playing an elemental every turn. So you play a free Flame Revenant into Overflow Surger. And you summon a copy of it for each turn in a row. You've played an elemental. Instead of a board of 3 2s, you get a board of 4 3s, which is a little harder to deal with. There's massive draw in the form of Unchained Gladiator, which 4 mana 4/4, Battlecry, draw card, repeat for each elemental you played last turn. So that's your big refill. Of course, you have Freeze is always kind of defensive and offensive. So Sleet Skater, nice for you freeze their biggest thing, so you can keep going face. Tainted Remnant has always been a bunch of damage. Deals 7 damage randomly split between all enemies. And then Triple Wick Trickster, it's a terrible body. It's a 4 mana 2/3, but Battlecry, deal 2 damage to 3 to a random enemy 3 times. So it's got kind of additional sources of playing elementals for damage besides just Lamplighter. And then
and you run a Brewmaster also.
I was just going to say
an extra Brewmaster.
Exactly. So
and the mini off of Sleet Skater is also very good for keeping your chain going too. I mean, you have fewer non-elementals in this deck than you do in the others, but even then, having a 1 mana elemental to play is always helpful, and this gives you an extra source of them. Plus, you can just synthesize, and then you basically have your curve taken care of for the next couple of turns.
Yeah, synthesize is. I'm glad that it's seeing play. It's always been one of those things that you sometimes pick off of a Discover when you just need minions, but it's very solid in this kind of deck. Go figure. 3 elementals.
Yeah,
good stuff.
And it gives you elementals from other classes too. I've gotten a hidden gem off that more than once, and that's been. I mean, you don't really have overheal synergies, but getting 2 healing a turn against some of these decks is not bad, especially when you get to value trade into something and then heal your minions up afterwards. That's pretty good.
So there's lots of options there, lots of aggressive options. I think because the warrior has kind of if you're playing slow, you're kind of playing the warrior, or you're destroyed by the Lamplighter rogues and stuff like that, the Control Incendia Shaman that I was playing is. We mentioned the Spell Mage earlier. We mentioned the Bonk Shaman. There is Rainbow DK floating around.
This is so hard to build. It Rainbow DK. I've been waiting for other people to do stuff, because every time I try and build it, I just I come up with something different. You can go Excavates, you can go really hard on Horizon's Edge, right? You can do Death Rattles. There's an absurd build where you try and get the Adaptive Amalgam Death Rattle. You growl it onto Reska, and then you also growl Talon Fordring's Death Rattle onto Reska, and so Reska just becomes a 0 mana 6/3 rush that every time it dies, it shuffles back into the deck and then draws itself. So it's like, this would be ridiculous no matter what, but it is hilarious as a specific thing to use against Zilliax, right? That you're just like, I'm going to mind control them forever. Like, every time you play more stuff, I'm going to mind control them and still have a Reska in my deck. I guess, unlucky if it gets hammed or something. But it's very goofy. This happened to me, and I was like, that works? What is going on? Right? Like, I never considered the possibility of, rather than putting other things death rattles onto the amalgam, which shuffles in, putting the shuffle in death rattle onto other stuff, because it keeps any enchantments is part of that death rattle. So that's just going to be a goofy thing forever while death rattle exists, because, I mean, you could just have an Eliza Goreblade that now shuffles into your deck every time it dies, right? It's very, very silly, the possibilities of putting Adaptive Amalgam's death rattle on other stuff.
That's one way to stave off fatigue, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, not even if you've got the Talon death rattle on the Reska as well, which you do kind of want so that just boards cannot kill you. You have to be killed over the top. I think this has not been doing much because, like, you just lose to Lamplighter Rogue.
Yeah.
So Lamplighter Rogue is the hero, is what I'm hearing from this.
Let's not go that far.
I would love to make Zilliax decks suffer by just stealing all their stuff forever. But
I mean, maybe Lamplighter Rogue is like an anti-hero. I can get that far, like a Wolverine or a Deadpool. Like, I can get there. I don't know that I'm going to call them, like, I'm not going to anoint them into the Justice League, like, right away, This is
one of those decks where I'm like, I'm disappointed I didn't come up with it. It's just so wacky. And someone beat me with it when I was playing a different kind of Rainbow DK, and I was just like, oh man, that's like horrifying and also really cool. I almost got there with, like, just playing Corpuscle every turn to buff up my CNE. Horizon's Edge is an insane card.
Yeah.
It is so much damage. I haven't gotten around to trying it, but I made like a not full Frost, because I think just Frostworm's Fury is not enough of an incentive right now, but Frost Blood just for Eliza, pretty much, and Quartzite Crusher. There's a lot of freeze synergy, and if you have a weapon that can freeze their face, then that means if they kill your Frostbitten Freebooter, they're gonna take 5. And it also makes Slippery Slope better. I don't think the 4/4 that discounts to 1 is worth it, but there's actually, with Corpuscle, maybe this is too cute, but I have Rambunctious Stuffy, which is the 3-mana 4/2 rush that after you cast a Frost spell, gain Reborn. Yeah, I don't know how it'll pan out, but just kind of utilizing some of the token generation stuff that's available to you, and just Corpuscle, Marrow Manipulator, Eliza, Horizon's Edge. Horizon's Edge, even with the hero power, it's so much damage. Like, if you focus on using other stuff like Frost Strikes or whatever to clear their board and just making sure Horizon's Edge goes face every time alongside Corpuscle, it's pretty gross.
It is a lot of damage. It is. Having faced this, it definitely does add up. And they can totally just keep your board clear. I guess they have so many little things that keep your board clear.
It's the point that, like, I'm not going to do this because there's no way it's right. But there's a 5-mana 5/5 that copies a location. And I don't know, the idea of like curving Horizon's Edge into that and then getting a copy of it, it's so damage.
There is also, I don't have an image of it, but there today at like 8 hours ago, someone posted a Frost Unholy Death Knight that's running Death Growl. It's running one amalgam. It's running Death Growl and Yelling Yodeler, and it's running Frostbitten Freebooter, which is the 3-mana 2/2 undead pirate with Death Rattle, freeze 3 random enemies. Any that were already frozen takes 5 damage instead. So I guess it's just like trying to freeze whatever it can and then get a ton of those activations down. And it says enemies, so it goes face. So I mean, you've got Snow Shredders in there, cost 1 if a character's frozen. You've also running 2 Tidepool Pupils to get more Death Growls, presumably. Because there aren't that many spells in the death. There's like Death Growl, there's Mining Casualties, Northern Navigation, which discovers a spell for your deck if it's frost, freeze a random enemy minion. Slippery Slope, which freezes a character, then draws a card for each frozen character. So I guess you just kind of keep cycling around and then freezing and trying to get as many of the Frostbitten Freebooter Death Rattles onto things as you can. And which is, the person who posted it said it's hilarious. I believe them because it sounds it. But I would probably need some sort of a primer to figure out how the hell even to play this deck, because I have from looking at it, it's like
how to kill them all at once.
Right.
Because if you're just Frost Unholy, then you don't have threads.
Well, but you have Death Growl and you have Mining Casualties, I guess, and like a hero power.
Oh, yeah, I guess if you copy it onto things that are going to die, then that's fine.
I'm not smart enough for this, but I'm just saying it exists. So.
That I will also have to try. Yeah, I haven't tried that. Just saw it today. Thank you, Goku, for bringing that to our attention in the Discord. And then we added it to our sheet. A Death Growl onto the Pupil. Interesting. Okay. I'll add this link into the show notes as well. I'll try to make sure we have all of these decks in the show notes. Although, again, by the time you're hearing this, things may have moved on.
They will all be obsolete. Enjoy.
And then, surprisingly, the OTK Paladin is kind of tier fun. Everyone was pretty concerned. Maybe not everyone, but many people were pretty concerned about this after theory crafting. But as usual, theory crafting is not the meta. And it's just, I didn't really try it because I was busy trying the sort of like buff Paladin instead, because that felt more my speed. But just a little bit awkward and slow, I think, compared to if everything goes perfectly, then it can be really fast. But
and against the slow decks, they armor, and then you don't have enough damage a lot of the time,
right?
Unless something goes really right for you.
It's this weird thing of like, you really want to get Holy Glow Sticks in the Tidepool Pupil, but you have to have played a Holy Spell to discount the Holy Glow Sticks. Like it's the deck, I think, that it, like so many things, can make really good use of Tidepool Pupil, but I think it's the one that it's hardest to get the right thing in it. And some stuff I think is sort of refinement issues. Some of it I think is just like you can't optimize both for being able to have a fighting chance against aggro decks and being able to maximize damage against some of the slower things. And as you say, the armor that they can gain with that gain 15 is substantial. And so if you miss the deal 6 damage on Grifta, you're gonna have a tough time.
Yeah. So just goes to show you can never take theory crafting too seriously. It's kind of impossible not to, because it's like the main time we've seen it played before the expansion comes out, but this always happens.
Yeah. I mean, some things are real, like the Pirate Demon Hunter isn't that different than what we saw at theory crafting, right? So like some things are there's probably going to be a couple of decks that come out of that more or less unscathed. Like the Painlock and the Pirate Demon Hunter are not all that different than what we saw in theory crafting, but not everything that you see in theory crafting is going to be a real deck, no matter how well it looks like it's performing.
Yeah. And sort of same with Well Rogue is not putting up the numbers that we were worried it might.
Thank goodness.
For the audio listeners, Wicked just like looked up in prayer, practically, with his hands in the air.
I mean, it's not surprising, right? There's a lot of aggro decks right now, and they just run over that kind of thing.
It's the same thing as we were saying about Handbuff Paladin. You cannot sit around for 4 turns gathering resources and then expect to go off on turn 5 and then not be dead or not run into an Zilliax wall. It's like there's no avenue. Like you're kind of, that 5-turn window is kind of like on either side. Either you can fight in the early game and then get to do what you want to do on turn 5, or if you're doing that, then you need some way to deal with Zilliax, and this has neither of those things.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that about covers. Are there other decks out there? Of course, but that about covers what we wanted to talk about, and it's been plenty of time, so I think that'll do it.
So we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at coincede.com. You can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coincede. Join us heavily live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coincede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coincede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. And if you would like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. So, I'm going to start out right before Concede. Just want to say, for any of our producers who get producer merch as part of their award, I've only gotten a couple messages. So I don't know if that's just because people aren't necessarily checking the Discord all the time or whatever. But if you are a producer and want your producer merch that we've been sort of forgetting for a while, DM me on Discord with what you want. We're gonna finally take care of that, and there's like new cool stuff that's in the shop because of Megasa. So
I'll have to keep thinking of and certainly taking requests of things for the shop. It might be hard to beat Unity Precision Perfection.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
That was pretty good. I will concede. So we have news that it says World of Warcraft developers. I don't think this applies to Hearthstone, but the World of Warcraft developers have formed a wall-to-wall union. So that means including from all the different departments. So, and they have like over 50% union support in like each department. So okay. They had a union before made specifically of QA workers, but this is the first one that is of its size. So that's awesome that they're really trying to make sure that they're treated well and can negotiate. So concede to all of the World of Warcraft developers. And I will also concede to the people who were a little patient with coaching this past month. I was not able to take every single person who had requested me, and so thank you all for being flexible. We, try to give the coach, but sometimes things end up a little lopsided on a particular month. And I've been behind on my graduate school classes, shall we say. I've not been the most efficient about certain assignments, and then the expansion has not helped that process. So I do need to take some of my excitement for these decks that I now want to go play and put it into actually like doing schoolwork. But thank you for your flexibility for all of our coachees. I always really enjoy that, and we will definitely try to make sure that we rotate people as best we can.
In that same vein, I will concede to Hidden Jester, who I had scheduled earlier in the week, and we've been night weaning Leah, and I've been kind of exhausted. It's getting better, but I just like completely whiffed mentally on. I'm quite late. Shoot, and so we've rescheduled, but yeah, I appreciate the understanding and flexibility.
Well, I will concede to the folks over at Squelch who have recorded their last Hearthstone I mean, I don't even want to say Hearthstone focus because that's not necessarily the right term for Squelch in the first place, but a Hearthstone centric episode. They're still going to be recording the podcast, but they're moving into more of a general PC gaming discussion. So it sounds like they're gonna focus on a game a week and make it more like a book club type of thing.
Cool.
So
That sounds fun.
best of luck to them. And I mean, obviously we're sad to have them leave the continually shrinking Hearthstone podcastosphere, but best of luck to them. And it's good to hear them at least continuing to record in some fashion, even if they're not focusing on the game that we all play.
Yep.
So. And and you already did yours, Adel. So
I did.
So that's it. So so that's gonna do it for us for this week, I guess. So until next time. So keep calm and don't let the Zilliax get you down. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All life must end. I yield for now. I concede. Well fought. I concede.
You win this one.
The victory is yours.
You have bested me.
I give up.
You win this one, friend.